When the lawyer read my name, the entire room sank into a suffocating silence, as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the air. I could feel dozens of pitying eyes turned toward me, while my brother, Nathan, smirked with the grin of someone who had just won big. That was the moment every last doubt in me vanished. My parents had truly chosen to punish me one final time from beyond the grave. "Sophie Carter, Mr." Bradley said awkwardly. "Your parents left you the painting Autumn Dusk." My heart clenched. Was that really all? Nathan let out a cold laugh, cutting through the tense silence that filled the dark, wood-paneled law office. His eyes were like needles stabbing into the already wounded core of my pride. "A cheap painting from the attic. You deserve it, Sophie. Fits your worth perfectly." I clenched my fists, trying to suppress the blood boiling in my veins. Nathan had never missed a chance to tear me down, even now when we were both adults, me, 28, and Nathan just turned 35. "Mr." Bradley continued in a flat voice, listing each item my parents left Nathan with exhausting detail. The grand estate in Connecticut, the penthouse in New York, 70% of Carter Corp shares, and countless stocks spread across corporations I'd only read about in financial newspapers. Nathan sat there, relaxed, like a young king hearing the inventory of his spoils. He smiled at me, but his eyes carried something cold as ice. "Don't look at me like that, Sophie. You know how it works. Those with capability deserve it." "Capability?" I sneered. My voice trembled with anger. My eyes stung, but I refused to let Nathan see me cry. "You call pretending, sucking up to our parents, and stepping on others to climb up capability?" The room fell into silence again, this time even colder. "Mr." Bradley looked at me with a mix of sympathy and discomfort, then handed me a piece of paper and said quietly, "Miss Sophie, your parents requested that you collect the painting within 5 days." Nathan leaned back in his chair, crossed his legs, and casually adjusted the collar of his expensive shirt. "I think you'd better not be late. A treasure like that shouldn't go missing, right?" He was mocking me once again. Nathan had won all his life. He had been favored, the golden child in our parents' eyes, obsessed as they were with power and wealth to the point where my existence barely mattered. I had always believed that, at least after they passed, no one could hurt me anymore, but I was wrong. I left the law office without another word. Nathan called out behind me, his voice dripping with cruel sarcasm. "Sophie, if you don't like the painting, just sell it. Might get you a couple dozen bucks." I rushed outside. The cold November wind hit my face like the world itself was mocking me. I drove back to my tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city, my mind swirling with the pain of this final rejection. A worthless painting. Maybe Nathan was right. Maybe that was exactly how my parents had always valued me. Back home, I sank to the cold floor, feeling lost and hollow. I had always tried to live true to my passion for art, but to my parents and Nathan, it was just something meaningless, something that brought neither money nor status. Maybe my whole life had been a cruel joke in their eyes, and that painting was the perfect period at the end of it. My phone rang. Nathan's name lit up the screen. I hesitated, then declined the call. I knew he just wanted to rub salt in the wound, to gloat or pretend he cared, like there was still some sibling bond between us. No, I didn't need that fake pity. What I needed was an answer. Why did my parents hate me this much? And why, in their final moments, out of the millions of things they owned, did they choose to leave me the one thing no one cared about? I stood up, deciding I had to retrieve that painting. If nothing else, I needed to touch my inheritance with my own hands, no matter how worthless it was. But at that moment, I had no idea that Autumn Dusk would soon pull me into a deep secret. My parents had spent their entire lives hiding a secret powerful enough to shake the glittering world. Nathan thought he owned. I arrived at the old Connecticut estate the following afternoon. The house now belonged to Nathan, but he didn't bother to show up, probably thinking I wasn't worth his time. The one who opened the door was Miss S. Clara, our longtime housekeeper. She grabbed my hand, eyes red and voice shaking. "Sophie, this is so unfair to you. If there's anything I could do," I shook my head, forcing a weak smile. "You've already done too much. I'm just here to collect my inheritance." The painting Autumn Dusk still hung in its usual spot above the fireplace in the reading room. My mother, Eleanor, used to retreat to every afternoon, sipping Earl Grey tea and staring at it like she was listening to secret whispers hidden in every brushstroke. It showed a dense forest at dusk, orange-red light filtering through the leaves, revealing strange shapes embedded in the trees, triangles, hexagons, circles. They'd never caught my eye before, but now, something about the painting made it impossible to look away. I reached out and gently touched the dark wooden frame, cold as metal in winter. Suddenly, Mrs. Clara spoke softly behind me, her voice hoarse. "Your mother used to sit for hours staring at it. In her final months, she started mumbling numbers, long strings of numbers. She kept drawing these shapes on napkins, on her sleeves, even on the bathroom mirror." I turned to look at her. "Everyone thought she was sick, didn't they?" She nodded. "Your father was furious," said she was losing control. But I didn't believe that. I think she knew something. I asked Mrs. Clara to help me wrap the painting carefully. She whispered before I left, "Be careful with Nathan. He doesn't know anything now, but if he finds out, he won't stop." That night, I hung the painting on the living room wall of my small apartment in Brooklyn. I turned off all the lights except for a desk lamp that cast a soft golden glow onto the painting. Something felt off. Those shapes, they weren't still. I blinked a few times, breathing rapidly. No, it had to be the lighting, or maybe I was just too tired. But the more I looked, the more certain I became. The shapes were arranged in a way that felt unnatural, a language, a code. I took photos of the painting and zoomed in on the details on my computer. The pale brown triangles, the interlocking circles, they looked too deliberate to be mere abstract art. I dug through old books, flipped through notes from my days studying art history, and suddenly stopped at one word: steganography, the technique of hiding messages within images. Just then, my phone buzzed. "Nathan?" I hesitated for a second, then declined the call. Less than 5 minutes later, a text appeared. "Sophie, return the painting. I'll pay you $5 million if you do it tonight." No questions asked. I froze. My heart raced. $5 million for a painting he had once mocked? I looked back at the message, then at the painting. A chill ran down my spine. Nathan never did anything unless it benefited him. If he was willing to pay that much, then the painting must contain something incredibly important. And it certainly wasn't just artistic value. Near midnight, I heard urgent knocking at the door. I peeked through the peephole. It was Nathan, his shirt wrinkled, hair a mess, and a look of panic on his face I had never seen before. He knocked harder. "Sophie, open the door. Mom left instructions about that painting. You don't understand, it's not yours." I stayed silent, my heart pounding. Nathan lowered his voice, but it was still icy. "You don't know what you're holding. It's connected to the entire Carter Corporation. Give it up, and I'll protect you." Protect me? He was threatening me. I stepped back, grabbed the painting off the wall, ran into my bedroom, and locked the door. Nathan's pounding echoed from the living room, but I didn't care. I needed to know what exactly my mother had left behind. Turning the painting over, I discovered a tiny gap in the lower edge of the wooden frame. I pried it open with a small knife, and a carefully folded piece of paper fell out. Hands trembling, I unfolded it. The slanted, soft handwriting, it was my mother's. "Sophie, if you're reading this, it means you've started to see what your father and brother always tried to hide. Don't trust them. You're the only one I trust. The shapes are coordinates. The colors are access codes. Follow the trail and be careful, because once you uncover the truth, they'll do anything to stop you from revealing it." Below were endless lines of numbers, coordinates, codes, things I couldn't understand just yet. But one thing I knew for sure: I had stepped into a game my mother had spent years preparing for. And this time, I wouldn't back down. I didn't sleep all night. The dim glow from the desk lamp lit the painting autumn dusk, making the geometric shapes flicker as if they were breathing. On the table was the paper my mother left, a short, sharp cipher cutting through everything I had ever believed about my family. I began connecting the dots. The red triangles led to symbols resembling geocodes. The deep blue circles looked like signs used in classical encryption. I opened specialized graphic software and layered the shapes based on the order my mother suggested in her note. Each layer added a new depth, as if leading me step by step into an abyss opening beneath my feet. Finally, a string of numbers appeared: 402069 8963 033. Stop us every year, April 23. A coordinate. I typed it quickly into Google Maps. It was a sparse forest near the Massachusetts border, about a 3-hour drive from where I lived. Along with it was a strange sequence of nearly 40 characters written beneath a small line of text from my mother, bunker code. Follow the colors: red, blue, yellow. The entrance is under the split old maple tree. I had no more doubts. My mother had left behind a map, not to treasure, but to a piece of truth that someone in this family was willing to pay millions to bury. I set out just as dawn broke. The highway was empty, but in the rearview mirror, I saw a black SUV following at just the right distance to avoid suspicion. I suddenly turned onto a dirt path leading to the edge of the forest, then looped back onto a side road, swerving through leafless trees. When I returned to the highway, the SUV was gone. It was dusk when I arrived. The desolate land sat next to an abandoned wooden cabin, its roof covered in moss, windows shattered. Following the directions, I waded through tall grass, mud clinging to my knees, until I saw the old maple tree, just as described. Its trunk, the size of a person's embrace, was split in half, like it had been struck by lightning. At the base of the tree was an old iron hatch, buried under dry leaves and debris. I cleared it off and found a small numeric keypad hidden in a crack. I took a chance and entered the color code my mother had left. A soft click sounded. The iron door swung open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. My heart pounded. Cold sweat soaked my back, but I knew I couldn't turn back, not now that I'd come this far. Each step echoed underground like the ticking of a countdown. At the bottom was a long concrete hallway, motion sensor lights flicking on with every step I took. At the end of the corridor stood a thick metal door. Next to it, a touchscreen asked for an access code. I entered the remaining sequence from my mother's letter. A green light lit up, the door opened, and I froze. In front of me was a modern laboratory over 2,000 square feet. High ceilings, pristine white walls, rows of gleaming stainless steel tables. Advanced electronics lined up like a military research facility. But what took my breath away wasn't the technology. It was the glass wall at the far end, where dozens of blueprints, patents, and prototypes hung, all signed Eleanor Carter, my mother. Her name, throughout my entire life, had never been mentioned as an inventor in the company's records. She was only listed as a nominal co-founder of Carter Corp., having stepped down from management in 1998. All the glory, all the medals, went to my father and Nathan. But now, I saw the truth with my own eyes. She had been the soul of the entire empire. I stepped closer to the files, scanning each title: Project Phoenix Level 4, Renewable Energy Technology, Rapid Bioreactor Module 2003, Neural Network-Based Image Recognition Protocol, Metamorphic Protocol 2010. My knees gave out. Each line of text hit me like a slap in the face, like a hand choking my throat. Among the designs, I found another handwritten letter, carefully tucked inside an envelope labeled, "To Sophie when you're ready." My dear, if you're reading this, it means you've seen what I've hidden for years. Your father and Nathan didn't just lie, they stole my work and the work of dozens of inventors I collaborated with. Carter Corp is not the empire your father built. It was built from stolen ideas. You were always different. You saw what others overlooked. That's why you're the last hope to expose the truth. But be careful, Sophie. When the truth is threatened, people will kill to protect the lie. I clutched the letter in my hand. A tidal wave of rage slammed into my chest, not because I'd been betrayed, but because I knew Nathan and my father hadn't just stolen. They had buried an entire generation of genius, just to hold on to their hollow spotlight. And I, Sophie Carter, the cast-off child, heir to a worthless painting, would be the one to dig up every inch of dirt they tried to bury. A soft noise echoed in my ear, an alarm. Or was someone else here in the lab with me? I spun around, still gripping my mother's letter, ready to face whatever ghost from the past was waiting in the dark. The sound of breaking glass made me jump. The lab lights flickered violently. I turned back, heart racing, as I saw Nathan soaked, hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot, his face twisted in fury. "How did you get in here?" I stepped back, hand tightening around the letter on the table. "You really thought you were the only one smart enough to decode the painting?" he sneered. "Mom didn't hide everything from Dad, and Dad didn't hide everything from me." I took another step back, my back hitting the cold control panel. "You were following me?" "Yes, from the moment you refused the $5 million. That's when I knew you'd found something Mom left behind. And I won't let you destroy what Dad and I have built for the past 30 years. You didn't build anything. You stole everything our mother worked for," my voice cracked. "But I didn't back down, and you know it." Nathan stepped forward, his foot stomping hard on the concrete floor, echoing through the room. She was nothing but a delusional woman, always paranoid that the world was against her. I pointed to the rows of designs hanging behind the glass. Then what about the dozens of patents under her name? The projects Carter Corp used to build its entire infrastructure? Don't tell me that's a coincidence. Nathan's face turned pale. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cruelty. "Give me the original code." "Now," I gave a cold smile. "Not a chance." He pulled a small object from his coat pocket. I froze when I recognized it. It was the drive with the source code I had just backed up, less than an hour ago. Mom left behind a lot of things, Sophie, but she didn't realize she raised a daughter so predictable. "You really thought the hard drive in your backpack was safe?" He held it up, shaking it slightly, like taking candy from a baby. I clenched my jaw, then steadied myself. "That code is only a copy." I activated the failsafe protocol. "Call without the main code, it's all garbage." The fury in Nathan's eyes flared like the last spark before the whole room exploded. He lunged, but I was faster. I kicked the control panel behind me, hitting the emergency switch I had located earlier. The steel door slammed shut, locking him inside the main lab. Nathan roared, pounding his fists against the bulletproof glass. "Open it, Sophie. You don't know what you're doing." I spoke through the intercom slit. "No, for the first time in my life, I know exactly what I'm doing." I pulled the key from the control board and quickly exited through the emergency escape tunnel a route. My mother had marked in her letter with a chilling note, "If you're discovered, take this path and don't look back." I drove through the night, winding mountain roads and thick fog swallowing every bit of light ahead. In my backpack, the USB holding the original access code remained untouched, a key capable of exposing everything. The theft, the forged documents, the trail of dirty money. By the time I got back to Brooklyn, it was almost 5:00 a.m. I didn't go to my apartment. I knew it was no longer safe. Instead, I headed to Mrs. Clara's old apartment, the loyal housekeeper, the only one who ever stood with my mother and me. The door opened after my third knock. She had a robe draped over her shoulders, eyes wide when she saw me. "Sophie, dear God, you look like you just escaped hell. I need a place to stay the night and a computer with a private network." Without another word, she led me into the living room. 10 minutes later, I had logged into the system using my mother's access codes and started sending the first batch of documents to the 3 places she had listed: the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission SEC, 3 major media outlets, and a nonprofit specializing in financial crime investigation. I couldn't stop now. The sound of the phone ringing startled me. It was an unknown number. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. A familiar male voice came through, sharp as a blade. "Sophie, you're playing with fire. Stop while you still can." I sighed and hung up without saying a word. I didn't need confirmation of who it was. My father's voice hadn't changed after all these years, powerful, cold, and full of threat. But now, he no longer held any control. For the first time, they were afraid of me. I turned back to the computer screen, watching the upload bar progress: 72%, 84%, 91%. Just a few more hours, and the world would know who really built Carter Corp and who stole everything. When the final documents were uploaded successfully, and I sent out 3 backup copies to the addresses my mother had listed in her letter, I thought I could finally breathe. But that peace lasted only 2 hours. At 7:13 a.m., the doorbell at Miss S. Clara's apartment rang 3 short chimes, a signal only my mother ever used. I looked through the peephole, my heart leaping into my throat. A man stood there, silver hair neatly combed, tall and slender, wearing a charcoal overcoat. His face, I thought I had buried it forever in memory. My father, Henry Carter. I stood frozen. He had been declared dead 3 years ago after a car accident in Colorado, a funeral with a closed casket, Nathan's crocodile tears, and carefully scripted condolences in the press. I believed it. We all did. And now, he was standing at the door, calm as if returning from a business trip. "Sophie, open the door. We need to talk." I didn't move. "Miss S." Clara came out, saw me frozen in place, then went to the nearby window and immediately stepped back, her face pale. "It's not just him. Nathan is out there too. They know you're here." I swallowed hard, a chill running down my spine. Clearly, they had never lost track of me. It had all been a cat and mouse game, and now it was time for them to show their true faces. I didn't open the door. Instead, I turned on the remote-connected security camera, recording everything. My father's voice rang out clearly. "Sophie, I know you've accessed the lab. You're the only one with clearance because Eleanor locked all biometric codes to bloodline genetics. You are the final key." I pressed the intercom button, keeping my voice surprisingly calm. "So the painting, all of it was just a performance?" He didn't deny it. "Yes, you're smart." Eleanor always said so, but she underestimated my persistence. That lab is the last thing standing in the way of fully legitimizing my control over Carter Corp. We can't let that legacy crumble over a few fragments of memory, I scoffed. "Legacy? Or a crime painted over with fake glory?" Nathan cut in, his voice sharp. "You don't understand anything, Sophie. Mom was always against the company. She was a threat. Her whole life was a delusion." I nearly shouted. "Delusion? Those patents are real. Those inventions are the foundation of this company. You and Dad are just licensed thieves." Silence. Then my father spoke again in a calm tone, like lecturing a child. "Carter Corp can't afford for the public to know that all of its achievements came from a woman working in the shadows. Investors, the media, stakeholders, they need a symbol, a family, a man. They won't accept anything else. So," I choked, "you chose to kill her, at least in image. You erased her from the company, from history, from memory." My father nodded, as if it were self-evident. "And you won't change anything, Sophie. The media is a battlefield for the faster player, and we control every thread, every major paper, every law firm, every voice. What you sent? It'll be twisted, buried, or spun as an internal conspiracy from a resentful daughter." I gasped for breath, but I wasn't panicked. I had expected this. I inserted the second USB, the one with the original backup, and the recording of this entire conversation into the computer, and began uploading it to an open-source platform. one that no one could censor, one no one could silence. Outside, Nathan slammed his hand against the wall. "You'll regret this, Sophie. You're destroying this family," I replied, eyes fixed on the upload progress bar. "This family rotted long ago. I'm just peeling back the paint so the world can see the decay inside." Suddenly, Miss S. Clara's phone rang. She answered, then turned to me with a horrified look. "The police are coming. Someone reported you for unauthorized access to Carter Corp's intellectual property. They say there's a warrant for your arrest." I stood up. "So that's Dad's final move, get me into holding before anyone can hear what I have to say." But this time, I was one step ahead. When that video uploaded, when millions of people saw the true faces of Henry and Nathan Carter, I knew they'd have nowhere left to hide. I looked straight into the camera before pulling the power cord. "Game over, Dad. And this time, Mom wins." I grabbed Miss S. Clara's hand and ran out the back door, ready to face whatever came next, because I had nothing left to lose except the truth. I had no time to hesitate. As soon as the final USB finished uploading, I unlocked the secondary control interface of the system my mother had left behind in the lab, a system called the Clarity Protocol. This wasn't just a standard security protocol. It was my mother's ultimate weapon, a counterstrike she had silently programmed over many years, prepared exactly for this moment when they tried to silence the truth. She would force it to scream. I entered the final command. The screen flashed, and the words appeared. Clarity Protocol activating. Disseminating data to all media channels. SEC WIPO Interpol. Cannot be cancelled. A second later, the system began pushing data at lightning speed evidence of stolen patents, Carter Corp's money laundering accounts, secret deals with politicians, and even confessions extracted from internal audio recordings. All of it had been encrypted and stored by my mother within the painting Autumn Dusk. Siren wails tore through the night outside. Police lights flashed red and blue across every window of Miss S. Clara's building. The thudding of boots on the stairs, the crackle of radios, and sharp commanding voices echoed. "FBI! Do not move! Drop any weapons!" I rushed to the back door, but I didn't run. I knew I wasn't the target. On the security camera, I saw my father and Nathan frozen in the hallway, flashlights shining straight into their faces. 4 armed agents closed in, shouting, "Henry Carter, you are under arrest for federal financial fraud, intellectual property theft, and obstruction of justice. Nathan Carter, you are charged with conspiracy, falsifying documents, and abuse of executive authority." Nathan screamed, almost hysterical. "No, no way! Sophie doesn't have the right. She has nothing." I clenched my fists and whispered to the screen, "I have the truth, Nathan. And this time, you can't silence me." My father said nothing. He simply stared into the camera, his eyes cold. He knew the game was over. He knew that everything he had tried to hide, everything he thought he could control, had slipped out of his hands. I stepped out of the apartment, raising my hands as instructed. A female agent approached, identified me, then immediately signaled her team to stand down. "Miss Sophie Carter, we've received the full data dump from Clarity Protocol. I represent the SEC and the FBI. Witness protection has been activated." I nodded, still unable to believe I had just taken down an empire. "They won't be able to spin this anymore, will they?" The agent responded with a confident smile. "Not with this much evidence. You did exactly what your mother wanted." The next 48 hours were chaos. I was taken to a secure hotel. My phone buzzed nonstop with calls from the media, attorneys, and international organizations. Every news channel was reporting Henry Carter, founder of Carter Corp, found alive, arrested. Billion-dollar empire collapses after daughter exposes truth. Sophie Carter, unlikely hero of a silent genius. I sat in front of the TV, my hands trembling slightly as the painting Autumn Dusk appeared in close-up. The layered, geometric shapes now a symbol of truth printed on the front pages of major international newspapers. "Miss S," Clara called. "Sophie, you know what your mother once said? That if anyone could do what she couldn't, it would be you. And today you did it." I said nothing. I just quietly looked out the window where the city was still bustling, but inside me was a strange stillness. It felt like my mother was standing somewhere very close, like a warm breath behind my shoulder. I never thought I'd become someone like this, the one who changed a corporation, who brought a family into the light, who was called the greatest whistleblower of the decade. But I knew one thing for sure: I didn't do this for fame. I did it for my mother, for the truth, for the inventors who were silenced, for myself, the daughter who was once invisible. And this was only the beginning. Within just 3 weeks after the Clarity Protocol was activated, Carter Corp, the empire my father had so carefully crafted, collapsed like a sandcastle struck by a crashing wave. Investors withdrew en masse. The stock price plummeted from $314 to under $18 per share. The press called it the greatest moral collapse in the history of American tech. The board of directors rushed to hold an emergency meeting, but by then it was too late. The federal court had already ordered a full freeze on all assets under the names of Henry and Nathan Carter. My father and Nathan were officially arrested on a total of 18 federal charges, including financial fraud, abuse of power, falsification of intellectual property records, and theft of patented assets. The evidence left behind in my mother's lab had permanently buried any chance of them turning things around. I didn't attend the trial. I didn't answer a single reporter's question asking whether I regretted sending my own father and brother to prison. I only spoke once, on national television. The truth never comes cheap, but justice is always worth it. 1 month later, I stood on the highest platform of the conference room in the former headquarters of Carter Corp., now officially renamed Aurora Innovations. Behind me was no longer the glossy logo my father once used to mask intellectual theft, but a new symbol, a burst of light breaking through the dark, formed by the geometric shapes from the painting Autumn Dusk. Just as my mother once said, true light always comes from the places no one notices. I took a deep breath, looking out at the silent crowd below, engineers, designers, new investors, even lawyers who had once turned their backs on the truth and spoke. Today is not an ending. This is a new beginning. Carter Corp was built on stolen dreams. Aurora will be built on real values. I announced the creation of the Innovation Restitution Fund, dedicating 40% of Aurora's first-year revenue to compensating the inventors whose work had been stolen and whose reputations had been destroyed by my father. Each one would receive the full value of their inventions, with interest for the years they were left forgotten. One of the first people I called was Dr. Marla King, who had invented the medical sensor system that Carter Corp later used in products worth hundreds of millions. She cried when I told her her patent would be restored to her name. "Your mother would be proud of you, Sophie," she said through tears. "You didn't just get justice for her, but for an entire silenced generation. I didn't forget the staff caught in the storm either." Aurora adopted a policy of total transparency. All strategic decisions would go through an independent ethics board. Executive compensation would be directly tied to compliance with business integrity standards. This would no longer be a place where secrets hid beneath a glossy surface. I reserved a private corner of my new office for my mother. There, the original Autumn Dusk painting, untouched, unedited, hung in the quiet room filled with natural light. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Eleanor Carter, the Forgotten Genius." Now her light guides us forward. I never erased the name Carter from the company's history, because that would be letting them bury my mother all over again. But I would redefine what that name meant, no longer a symbol of greed, but one of redemption. A year later, Aurora became the first tech company to receive the Patent Integrity Certification from WIPO. We had restored the reputations of 36 inventors, launched 12 social innovation projects, and established a scholarship for underprivileged engineering students named the Eleanor Scholarship. One late evening, just as I was about to leave the office, my assistant handed me an envelope no sender listed. Inside was a short, handwritten note. "You've won, but this isn't the end." I folded the note and locked it in a drawer. I knew Nathan was still trying to shift the game from prison, and my father had remained completely silent. But none of that mattered anymore, because now justice no longer rested in the hands of the powerful. It belonged to those who dared to reveal the truth. And Sophie Carter, the girl once handed a worthless painting, now held the key to leading a generation into a future that could no longer be stolen. 2 years after the Clarity Protocol was activated, the name Henry Carter, once hailed as a symbol of power, innovation, and the ideal entrepreneur, was now nothing more than a strike-through in court documents and a case study in ethics classes at business schools. The federal trial ended with a 35-year prison sentence for my father and 20 years for Nathan, with no early parole due to the severity of their crimes. All personal assets, including their remaining shares in Carter Corp., were fully seized to compensate the victims and inventors harmed over the years. And I, Sophie Carter, the daughter once handed a painting deemed worthless, stood in the whirlwind of media, politics, and transformation, never allowing myself to forget the most important truth. I was merely the heir to my mother's truth. The painting Autumn Dusk now hangs in the main lobby of Aurora Innovations above a simple white stone plaque that reads, "Where silent shapes once whispered the truth the world chose to ignore." Thousands visit every year as a symbol of the ethical revolution in tech. No one dares call it worthless anymore. No one mocks its strange lines or dismisses its abstract geometry. It's a cipher of awakening, a silent yet powerful declaration of the truths that power once tried to bury. One Friday afternoon, I stood alone in the internal gallery, staring at the painting under the light of the sunset filtering through reinforced glass. That light fell perfectly across the shapes that once kept me awake at night, now familiar, comforting as my mother's breath. "Miss S." Clara, still the curator of the memorial, stepped beside me. "You know, Sophie, students often ask me, why did your mother hide everything in a painting? Why not use a hard drive encryption or some advanced tech?" I smiled, eyes still fixed on the delicate brushstrokes. "Because she knew nothing is more enduring than art. No one suspects beauty of being dangerous, and no one censors a painting if they don't understand it." "Miss S." Clara nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what saved the world from a permanent lie." I returned to my office, where I still spend 1 hour each week reading letters not from investors, but from ordinary people, engineering students, small inventors, even children sending drawings full of triangles and circles with notes like, "Miss Sophie, I'm learning to draw like your mom." I keep every letter. Every scribbled word is a reminder this journey didn't end with a sentence or a press conference. It is a living legacy, passed on daily, generation by generation. Nathan once wrote to me from prison. The first 3 lines were accusations, the last 2 an apology. I didn't reply. I no longer felt hatred, but I wouldn't allow toxicity to return either. Some systems are meant to be broken permanently. As for my father, he remained silent, not a single word. But I understood. To him, that silence was his final bitterness. Nothing hurts more than being remembered by history as the man who stole the dreams of the one he once loved. 3 years later, Aurora Innovations became the only tech company in the U.S. to be honored simultaneously by both WIPO and the United Nations for contributions to innovation justice. We launched a program to protect the intellectual property of individual inventors, helping small creators avoid being exploited by large corporations. I also established the Eleanor Carter Award, honoring women whose scientific work had been forgotten but held the power to change society. The first recipient was a high school teacher from New Mexico who invented a low-cost water filtration method using biochar. No one had paid attention to her before. Now, the world knew her name. When I presented the award, it felt like I was handing over the crown my mother never got to wear, placing it in the hands of someone truly worthy. On the final night of the third year, I sat in my office with autumn dusk quietly behind me. Outside, snow had begun to fall. I placed my hand on the window and whispered softly, "I brought you home, Mom." No answer, but I knew if she were here, she would say the same thing she always did when I was little. The truth doesn't need to be believed. It just needs someone brave enough to live for it, and I did. And I will continue to for her, for the truth, and for the dreams that must never be stolen. Sophie's story is a powerful reminder that no matter how deeply the truth is buried, it can be uncovered with courage and conviction. In a world where power and money often eclipse justice, standing up against wrongdoing takes not only intelligence but unwavering determination. Sophie didn't just reclaim her mother's honor, she redefined an entire system through integrity. In real life, this story reminds us justice doesn't come from silence. It comes from brave action to defend the truth. What do you think of Sophie's journey and the message behind her story? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel to keep exploring real-life stories filled with emotion and powerful lessons about family and life.